Hello, everyone. I add my welcome to that of Dean Hollerith, and thank you for joining us in this worship service. A special word of gratitude to our interfaith friends and leaders in this city, Rabbi Shankman and Imam Hindi, for blessing us with your sacred texts and prayers, and most of all, your friendship and our common commitment to serve the common good and the aspirations we share as one people. Thank you to the Cathedral leadership for opening this space to us for prayer all day as we await an outcome that we have been repeatedly told cannot be predicted. My reflections here will be brief, focused on two questions we might consider. Those of us who live our lives in faith, with faith in a good and loving God, or who on our best days want such a faith, or who wonder if in the world as it is, if such a faith is even possible, yet nonetheless find ourselves here. And the questions are, what does God have to say to us in times of uncertainty? And in uncertain and anxious times, what might we say to God? Uncertainty is the existential reality for all of God's creation. We human beings are unique in our awareness of uncertainty, such that we live most of our lives not knowing what lies ahead. But because uncertainty is so anxiety-producing, I don't know about you, but I have like butterflies, not just in my stomach, but from toe to head. Because uncertainty is so anxiety-producing, we spend a great deal of our lives controlling as much as we possibly can, which is, for the most part, a good thing. But then there are those excruciating moments when we realize how little control we actually have. Uncertainty is the terrain in which we are both vulnerable to our most unhelpful tendencies and when we make our greatest mistakes, and, paradoxically, when we have the potential to take enormous leaps of personal and societal courage. And it is to that potential I speak to you now. We start, as we must, where we are, with whatever we bring to the not knowing, pondering what God might say. Our sacred texts and traditions speak with many voices and perspectives, but I think we would agree that the clearest, strongest, most consistent message from God is this: fear not, for I am with you. It's not a promise of rescue, though there are stories of such rescue. It has the hint of chastisement, but we needn't hear it as such, but rather simply as a reminder that we can turn to God in our fear and seek the reassurance and grace of God's presence. Now, we would be made of stone if we weren't disappointed when the promise of God's presence doesn't produce the outcome we long for, and if in our disappointment and grief we lose our bearings of faith for a time, perhaps a long time, even altogether. And yet, the words and the promise of presence remain. Fear not, for I am with you. When we long for more, when we need more, it's hard to imagine how God's mere presence could possibly be enough, until it is. Until it's all we have, and by grace, it is enough. Now, As fundamental as this assurance of God's presence is, it seems that God has more to say to us in uncertain times. For God is not only our rock and our strength, a sure and certain help in times of trouble, God is also the one who exhorts us to the highest of aspirations in the hardest of times, which doesn't seem fair, and yet it's a sign of God's respect for us and belief in us. So it is that all our sacred traditions, when speaking for God, ask us to see in all persons the image of God, to love our neighbors as ourselves, to share what we have, to control our tongue when we have nothing constructive to say, to refrain from evil, refuse to hate, to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with our God, to seek the common good, to live in hope, to sacrifice for the sake of love. Now that's a lot to ask. But remember that it is God who is asking us, God who evidently believes in us enough to ask, and more than that, assures us when we ask that we will be given the strength and courage we need to do hard things as if they were easy, which for me is one of the most compelling witnesses to a life of faith, doing hard things as if they were easy, as if, in other words, we didn't have to tell everybody how hard they were. We just do them without complaint, without cynicism, without expectation that we're doing anything other than what our God asks of us. And on a few rather remarkable occasions, we actually are able to do by the grace that flows through us. That's what I think God has to say to us today. What then do we say to God? I don't know about you, but I, for one, am saying all sorts of things. Can't help it. And on one level, I know that all my expressed feelings are not necessary before the God to whom all hearts are open, all desires known, and from whom no secrets, not even mine, are hid. But there's something to be said for being straight with God, being real. I heard a preacher say yesterday that prayer is one of the few ways we demonstrate to God that we believe there is a God. Taking our thoughts, our hopes, our fears to God and asking, praying, maybe even begging for whatever result we long for at the end of whatever uncertainty we're living in. Or at least let me acknowledge that that's where I am most times as my starting point. And if I were to stop there, if you were to stop there, God wouldn't love you or me less, but we would be giving God considerably less to work with through us. So the question then becomes, do we have anything else to say to God? Well, I do. I suspect you do too. Something along the lines of praying that no matter what happens, we are asking you, God, for guidance and strength to live as best and as faithfully as we can, no matter what, and to help others do the same. And while the context will surely be dramatically different depending on the outcome, the work will be the same tomorrow as it is today, or Wednesday, or Friday, or next month. To love God and neighbor, to ameliorate suffering and to strive for justice, to care for the hurting, shield the joyous, to persevere in hope. Is there anything else for us to say? Anything you would add? Well, I suggest one more thing. It's really a variation of the second prayer for guidance and strength, but it's got a little bit more of ourselves in it, and even owning a sense of vocation and destiny, because we are the ones who are here now. The Christian text that you heard read and printed in your bulletin is Jesus' prayer to God as recorded in the Gospel of John, shortly before the events that he prayed, shortly before the events that would lead to his arrest and crucifixion. And you may know that there's another version of this prayer in other accounts of Jesus' life. And in that earlier version, it's probably an earlier version, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he's praying alone in the middle of the night while his 3 closest friends succumb to sleep. He's sweating in fear at the prospect of his arrest. And there Jesus prays, as the story is told in those texts. There he prays, "Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. But your will, not mine, be done." It's a great prayer for us to pray. But in this version, the Gospel of John, the prayer is a little different. In fact, it's a lot different. Context is a little different. He's not in the garden, he's in Bethany, a village outside of Jerusalem, as he's preparing to enter the city. And his tone, you hear it, it's one of resolve and a sense of destiny. He doesn't ask for the cup to pass him by, because it is for that cup, it is for that hour that he had come. And so if we were to pray our version of this prayer, we would be in some way saying to God, "Okay, God, we are here now. No matter what happens, we are here. And we will do our best to embody your spirit in whatever way is needed." Such a prayer is to acknowledge, and I heard this from another preacher, by the way, that's how I handle anxiety. I just go to church a lot. So I've been listening to a lot of great sermons this week, and it's only Tuesday. But in a sermon I heard on Sunday, the preacher, Jim Quigley, reminded us of something the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, once wrote. Hear this, church, friends, synagogue, temples, hear this, people of God, that there are times when what matters is not that we are, in any sense, safe in the hands of God. Let me say that again. There are times when what matters is not that we are, in any sense, safe in the hands of God, but that God is safe in our hands. And also, please God, may others be safe in our hands, those with whom we share this life. We are no longer asking God to change what cannot be changed, or to give us only the strength to persevere and hope, but rather we are saying to God and to one another, we are here. This is our time to be your people on this earth, because you believe in us and you have called us. And with your grace, we will rise to this hour. Amen.